Here is ready for a hard conversation. That's what we're doing this week with everybody opposite to Saturn. We got a gang of planets moving into Virgo and opposing Saturn. We're still in the middle of eclipse season, so there's plenty of catalytic moments where things want to move around and get started or finished in some kind of way, and there might be a certain sense of uncertainty about things. Let's get into it. My name is Zamboni, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. Thank y'all so much for being here. This one is everybody opposite Saturn. So Saturn has moved back into Pisces, right? So in general, I tend to like Saturn in Pisces over Saturn in Aries. Saturn feels a little more comfortable in Pisces, and more importantly, Saturn is making a nice aspect to Jupiter, who rules Pisces. So there's a certain kind of cooperation or a sense of ability to do things, especially ability to do the Saturn things. So that means that we're going to be looking at an ability to endure, an ability to navigate obstacles, challenges, boundaries, maybe put up some boundaries in some kind of way. So to do the Saturn things, right? To do effective boundaries, right? Looks like, especially because, we've got this, Saturn has been conjunct Neptune for, I don't know, like a year and a half, something like that. And so there's been this question of like, what's real and what's tangible versus what is only imaginary. And there's been a tension there, right? And Pisces is that place for sure. Pisces is the deep oceanscape full of dreams and all of this kind of thing. And so there's a sense of like, what's real and what is imaginary. And Saturn is the one who's going to sort of pressure test it and give you the sense that like, okay, this is the real deal. This is actually going to stand the test of time, or is going to stand up to the pressures of lived experience of gravity and actually being in the world and all of the rest of that sort of stuff, right? So that's who Saturn is, and Saturn looks pretty capable in the end of Pisces. With that said, Mercury, who is currently in Virgo and rules Virgo, is exalted in Virgo. Love to see a strong Mercury placement. This Mercury is early in the week going to be opposite to Saturn. Then later we're going to see the Sun moving in and opposing Saturn, and at the same time that happens, we're going to have a new moon, which is actually going to be an eclipse, which is opposite to Saturn. So Saturn, and so an opposition is the aspect which is associated with Saturn. It's the one that is most tense. It's the sort of like can't live with them, can't live without them kind of aspect. By the way, if you want to learn how I delineate these kinds of things and learn to delineate them yourself, you can go to zambonifunk.com. There's a course there called Astrology from the Ground Up. It's really goes in depth to how to read astrology from the ground up, from a basic foundational level. So if you just are interested in astrology and don't know where to start, that's a great place to start. If you don't feel like doing all that shit and you just want me to read for you, also zambonifunk.com, you can get a reading there. So so an opposition is associated with Saturn is going to be full tense and it's the can't live with them, can't live without them. Like we can see each other. There's a clear understanding of what's going on, and I hate that shit that you're talking about over there, that kind of thing, right? So Mercury in Virgo is going to have that kind of opposition to Saturn. So whenever we see Mercury and Saturn together, we're going to be looking at difficult conversations, or we're going to have to talk about boundaries or something like that, right? It looks like definitely the saying no is going to be something that is likely to show up here. I would think that where there are negotiations taking place, you might find yourself where you have to sort of like draw a line in the sand and be like, listen, we are not passing this point. We're not going to do that. And this is a deal breaker for me. And in the event that there is a deal breaker and then someone tries to cross that line, you might have to let the deal be broken under this kind of situation. This doesn't look like the kind of thing where things are flowing easily or working to get like playing well together, this kind of thing. It looks like you might be in a situation where you got to play hardball or something like that, where you have to be so serious about what the boundaries are actually going to be, and you might have to stand on business with some of that. Somebody else might be standing on business with you. You might be in a position where you're like, oh, can I just put my little toesies over there? And the other person might be like, no, we talked about this. And so I would expect that kind of tension to come up a lot with that Mercury opposite to Saturn. Mercury is the communicator one. and the negotiator and all this kind of thing, transactional things and the marketplace and all that sort of stuff, looks like it's going to be going through it with this opposition to Saturn. Now, Mercury is going to move into Libra, and so we like to see Mercury in Libra, again, for transaction and negotiation. This is really good. I love to see Mercury in an air sign. Mercury does really well in all three of the air signs. And so Mercury moving into Libra will be a bit of a kind of relief, or like it's going to be, once Mercury gets past that Saturn, Mercury is in not quite as much dignity, essential dignity in Libra as in Virgo, but like still very capable. The thing about that is that Mercury in Libra is going to be ruled by Venus, who is going to be moving into Virgo. So Venus in Virgo is very nitpicky. It is Venus in Virgo. It loves a certain sense of aesthetic perfection, balance, symmetry, these kinds of things. But in Virgo is the sign that is very good at noticing all of the little details, right? And so what will happen sometimes with Venus in Virgo is that every little flaw becomes super loud. It becomes something that can become a problem, or it can be something that, like I always think of Venus in Virgo as being really good for copy editing, right? So if you're like reading through and trying to find all the grammatical errors and, oh, well, like this sentence doesn't make sense in this order. What if we rearrange the words and like, oh, you actually need a semicolon here instead of a comma splice or something like this. You know what I mean? Like the details of that situation. Venus in Virgo is very good at that kind of thing. Venus in Virgo sometimes struggles in friendly conversation when you don't need somebody correcting your grammar, but you need somebody understanding what you're trying to say, right? It's the classic distinction between Pisces, which wants to see the whole thing, opposite to Virgo, which wants to see the details. It's the forest for the trees, or the trees in the forest, right? It's the difference between those kinds of things. So Venus moving into Virgo does get a little bit on the nitpicky side of things, and there's big, and like that opposition between Virgo and Pisces is major. It's the thing that's happening this week. We've got Mercury opposite to Saturn, then we've got this solar eclipse opposite to Saturn. So we're going to get this new moon solar eclipse at the end of the week. I think it's over the weekend. And so eclipses are moments of shadow when there's darkness and uncertainty. It's a moment when the sun is going to be gobbled up by the primordial dragon, right? And it, they tend to be kind of fearful, or especially like the fear of the dark. What's out there? I don't actually know. The thing I would expect here is like, so Saturn's going to say no to it. And then because I have to say no, then I have to go do something different, or I have to let the deal be broken. But that wasn't the plan. That wasn't what I had hoped for. And so now I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how to deal with this necessarily. And so there's this uncertainty about it and a bit of trepidation or nervousness about that. Virgo is very good for being nervous or anxious in some kind of way, right? So we see all of that going on. And, the sun opposite Saturn generally is, it looks like conflict between ownership and management. You know what I mean? Like authoritative questions about stuff like, how are we going to actually make the thing happen? And, the nitty gritty of it, all that sort of stuff looks like it wants to be really loud this week. And so one of the things that I would think would be useful for us this week is to be super clear about your values, what actually matters to you, and what doesn't matter. Like, is there a hill that you don't need to die on? What about that, right? Because motherfuckers are gonna be dying on some hills this week, right? So do you have to die on each one of these hills, or can you maybe prioritize, right? Maybe you can let some stuff slide. Maybe you don't need to be all up in somebody's piece about the Oxford comma. I know, boo-boo. But at the same time, can we see what's actually going on here? Can we see what really matters? I would also think that grace is going to be a really, grace is probably not going to be easy to just pull out of your pocket this week. It's probably going to require some work to do that. However, Saturn is very good for rewarding work, especially doing the things that you don't feel like doing. Saturn is very good for making the long-term turn out in a way that is useful and effective. And so doing the thing that doesn't necessarily feel good in this moment, but that can plausibly lead to a better long term, is a strong move this week. Thank y'all so much.